So I found this interesting article topic that came out last week. It was on October 2nd. And it's a very interesting article. It's especially appropriate given the Democrat political debates that are coming out lately. A lot of the Democrat candidates are talking about more freebies. A lot of the Democrat candidates have their tax increase plans, whether it's Elizabeth Warren, who wants to tax people who own stocks more, or Yang, who wants universal basic income of $1,000, which, by the way, is not going to be $1,000 into your pocket, because then you're going to be paying, in real terms, a 17% value-added tax. So by the time that $1,000 check hits your way, in real terms, will be 830 at most of devalued dollars. But today's story, like I said, came last week, and it is a really good one, very interesting. I have not seen it covered anywhere else. This is by Terence P. Jeffrey. He is editor-in-chief at cnsnews.com, and he got this data verified by employees at the Bureau of Labor Statistics themselves. So get ready to hear something interesting. His article headline is titled, "Americans Spent More on Taxes in 2018 than on Food, Clothing, and Healthcare Combined." Does that sound like the greatest economy ever? That sounds more like the libertarian narrative that taxation is theft, taxation is robbery, and that governments have really come up with a whole new way along with the stealth inflation tax, and I'll talk about that later after this article. When you add in the stealth inflation tax, the real numbers, and I would love to see someone put out a study on this, because I spent almost an hour looking through multiple search engines, looking through the Tax Foundation website, looking through Mises, looking through other Ludwig von Mises, Mises.org website, and others, looking for studies that go through all the different taxes and trying to add them up. So not just the income tax, your payroll tax, your property tax, all these taxes, sales tax, all these taxes here in the United States, and trying to add them all up to see what is the real effective tax rate for most Americans. Because you know what, in my opinion, I think in many cities and states, especially California, especially New York City, especially the state of California, especially many of those hardcore Democrat states, the amount of taxes, and the larger cities, the taxes that a lot of Americans are paying, when you add them all up, all the different types of taxes total, so your total revenues minus all the taxes you pay added up each year, it's got to be well over 50%. It might even be over 60% in many areas like New York City and California. And in some areas, if you add in the inflation tax too, which is the stealth tax, and according to the Chapwood Inflation Index by Ed Butowski, I interviewed him years ago about this. It's in the archives. Christopher Martinson also interviewed him about this. He says the real inflation rate, annual inflation rate, is between 8% and 13.2% per year on consumer items, healthcare, all those things in major U.S. cities. So the average 5-year annual inflation rate is a lot. So if you add in the stealth inflation tax with all the other taxes layered on, income tax, property tax, payroll tax, all those things, most Americans are paying, at least if they're in a low, quote unquote, low tax state, it's at least right around 50%. And in higher tax states, it's even more than that. Quite a bit, could be a lot more. So let me continue with the article. No one has done that study where they try to actually calculate a real effective tax with the inflation tax, with layering on all those taxes. So if you can do that and you can write an article, I think there would be a large audience for it on one of the major news websites or libertarian or limited government websites. It would get a lot of views if someone actually went line by line and tried to do the math. There is an opportunity to build an audience and a platform for that. Heck, I'd even interview you on my show if the research is good and you sent me it, if you emailed me it. Okay, so Americans on average spent more on taxes in 2018 than they did on the basic necessities of food, clothing, and healthcare combined, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey. The survey's recently published Table R1 for 2018 lists the average, quote, detailed expenditures of what the BLS calls, quote, consumer units. Consumer units, which is very wonky, says the Bureau of Labor Statistics, include families, single persons living alone or sharing a household with others, but who are financially independent, or 2 or more persons living together who share major expenses. Okay, so now we've gotten consumer units out of the way. I Kind of ridiculous that they call it that, but whatever. I guess, these people are really wonky. In 2018, according to the table of the data, which is linked in the article, if you want to check it out later, it will be in the information and description section. American consumer units spend an average of $9,031.93 on federal income taxes, $5,023.73 on Social Security taxes, which the table calls, quote, deductions, $2,284, and by the way, most of us aren't, if you make enough money, you probably won't see a Social Security check. Probably going to be means testing, not in the near future, but once the Democrats have more control of Congress and or control the White House, may actually have means testing. Although the Social Security test is the third rail, I mean, things are going to get tight with the budget deficits that are being run by Republicans and Democrats. $2,284.62 on state and local income taxes, $2,199.80 on property taxes, and $77.85 on what the Bureau of Labor Statistics calls, quote, other taxes. This number is very low because, if you go out to eat a few times, that $77.85 on what the BLS calls, quote, other taxes can be done in about a month, less than a month, depending upon how much you go out to eat and where you go out to eat. There's restaurants I eat at where it's 10% tax on a restaurant, and I see like $8 or $10 on the check when I'm splitting it out at a party or with friends. So that number is low, but they're trying to add up some of the taxes, itemize them and add them up. And they're not adding up all the taxes, and even adding up, let's see here. There's federal income tax, Social Security, state and local income tax, property tax, and a small amount of others. So that's 6, and that's still a large amount. The combined payments the average American consumer unit made for these 5 categories of taxes was $18,617.93 per year for 2018. At the same time, the average American consumer unit was paying these taxes. It was only spending $7,923.19 on food, $4,968.44 on healthcare. I guess maybe they're getting a subsidy then on healthcare. Must be getting a subsidy with Obamacare then. And $1,866.48 on, quote, apparel and services. These combined expenditures equaled $14,758.11. So more money is being spent on taxes than on food, healthcare, and apparel and services. And the, let's see here, the difference is $3,859.82. And the journalist who wrote the article asked the Bureau of Labor Statistics to confirm the numbers. And so they did. And he talks about it later in the article. So Americans are forced to pay more for government than they pay for food, clothing, and healthcare combined, and it's becoming an enduring fact of life. Greatest economy ever? It doesn't really sound that way. It sounds more like bullshit marketing, just like how Jerome Powell said that what he's going to do with Federal Reserve balance sheet expansion soon is not QE. That is more bullshit marketing. That is meant to confuse and obfuscate because most everyday Americans know what QE is. They know it's bad. Okay, I've had conversations with regular people who are not astute with the financial industry, and they know what QE is. They know it's bad. They know it means the banks get it. Well, guess what? The Fed's going to do similar stuff to QE and not call it QE. And it's going to be QE by another name. So, sounds like similar stuff, normal government tricks. Okay, let me return to the article. A review of the data. The journalist also went back to the BLS data table, the same data table for the last 6 years on record, besides 2018, that in every one of those years, the average American consumer unit paid more in taxes than it paid for food, clothing, and healthcare combined. So people who are poor, working class, lower middle class are not getting ahead. They are getting hit with big tax bills. They are not being able to develop savings. They are getting killed with shrinkflation, taxes, and what I call stagflate and tax and lie. So you can't build savings. Prices are not being allowed to fall. New taxes are being layered on, and old taxes are normally, they go one direction. Very few instances I can name personally in my life or from people I've talked to where their certain taxes have actually gone down. Now, some people did benefit from the Trump tax cuts, but the Trump tax cuts may only be temporary. They're supposed to, I think, start going back up, even if Trump wins a second term a couple years from now, though he talked about a second tax cut. But that means even larger budget deficits, and that could be a lot more problems, which I guess the Federal Reserve can cover over temporarily with QE, a version of QE. They're not going to call it QE. Let's just call it balance sheet expansion, because now I'm going to get comments from people that are saying, it's not QE. Jerome Powell said it's not QE. I already got comments like that in the Wall Street from Main Street Facebook group today saying, he said it's not QE. Well, it's balance sheet expansion. The Federal Reserve is in 100% bullshit marketing rebrand mode. So, insane. This is why the average American is thinking about voting for socialism. And this is why they're going to get burned even more. Because they see that they're not getting ahead. They see that they're getting less goods and services. They're not getting any savings. Their dollar is not going further. It's not because of capitalism. A lot of it's because, not that there really is any capitalism, but it's because the dollar is being devalued, number one, rapidly, and so is all the other fiat currencies. And then on top of that, government, because government doesn't want to cut its spending, government doesn't want to cut its budgets, government is laying on taxes too. So you have devalued fiat currencies and taxes being layered on, and the average person is not getting their income is not rising. And this is why I tell everyone now, this is not financial advice, just my opinion. This is why I tell everyone, you're going to need a side hustle. You're going to need to be entrepreneurial. Even if you don't want to start your own business, you're going to need a way to make extra revenue with a side hustle or a side business or a family business on the side or something you can do online or something on the weekends, something you can make those extra dollars to maintain your standard of living or offset what's happening with the currencies and the taxes. The currencies being devalued and the taxes. Okay, so he goes through more of the math here and the differentials. He goes through more of the math and differentials. It's just getting bad and more depressing if you want to read it. So I would love to see someone, like I said, I'll just put this out there. I would love to see someone do a study and try to go through and, this was my payroll tax that I paid, Social Security tax out of my paychecks, sales tax that I paid at my, buying a burrito and buying clothes, all these things and trying to calculate that. I'd love to see someone actually do that. And then if you add all those tax numbers up, plus the annual inflation tax, the stealth tax, which I think Keynes said that 1 in a million Americans can't recognize. 1 in a million people can't recognize inflation. One of the few things I actually agree with Keynes on. Then the real tax rate, the real effective tax rate for Americans, despite the Trump tax cuts, and there are people that benefited from the Trump tax cuts. I was not one of them because I didn't make $65,000 minimum on this podcast last year. But taxes are just a part of life, and they're going to get worse because the governments do not want to cut spending. The governments actually want to increase spending. Lewis was criticizing me. Yeah, he's all about this repo stuff, that it's not a big deal. Meanwhile, every other expert I've talked to says it's almost definitely putting the place for a permanent repo facility in QE. I'm friends with Lewis, but this is just ridiculous. I don't really care. Yeah, the pensions have made bad investments, though. The pensions are underfunded, too. That's a good point. So pensions are very underfunded. They made bad investments. They've gotten hustled by hedge funds, private equity, Wall Street investment banks. And guess what? The pension funds put lobbyists in let's use California, because those are two of the largest pension funds. You have CalPERS and CalFERS. And they have lobbyists in Sacramento, and they're trying to get taxes increased on tourists, which are already sky high for tourism going to California. But they're trying to get taxes layered on and taxes increased to help make up for pension shortfalls. So do you think then if the taxes keep going up, do you think that people are going to, the marginal tourist is going to keep wanting to go to California? If you're paying over a 10% rental car tax and an over 10% per night hotel tax, and you're paying a restaurant tourist tax, and maybe there's taxes at Disneyland and there's taxes at Universal Studios. When I lived in Southern California, I think it was a long time ago. I remember when it was $125 for a full year for a Disneyland annual pass. So you could go to Disneyland as many times as you wanted for $125. And I'm pretty sure that you can't even go to Disneyland, I think, one park or two parks in a day for that price now. Bill says real taxes are way over 50% for almost everyone. Yes, depending upon the state and the city and what your standard of living is, the things you buy, most people are dealing with taxes around, when you add in a stealth inflation tax, according to the Chapwood Inflation Index, or even use the Shadow Stats numbers, it's in a low tax state, might be right around or a little bit below 50%. In some of those Democrat states where there's lots of bureaucracy, lots of government agencies, lots of people, lots of big cities, very high tax states, you're looking at taxes, I think, well above 60% when you add in an inflation tax. Might even be above 70% at this point. And the European Union is in the same boat. The European Union, very high tax. And if you have super high taxes like that, unless you know how to get around the tax laws, you can't build any wealth. You can't build savings. If you're getting taxed to death like that, it's unbelievably difficult to keep your head above water and also to build savings and investments and stuff like that. Which is why a lot of people are trying to leave the high tax areas in the United States and Europe. There's a lot of European Union people in the European Union who want to retire in parts of the United States. They see it as a lot cheaper. And property taxes are a big one. Property taxes are a main source of revenue for local governments. So they're going to keep, those things are going, I've never heard a story actually of where property taxes went down. Even in Detroit, where Detroit was a fallout area in 2008 where they couldn't give away the houses, they still didn't cut property taxes. So people didn't want to buy that. A lot of people didn't want to buy the houses in Detroit. The houses, some of them were $1. I think at one point in 2008, at the height of the crisis, I think some of the houses in downtown Detroit, but they were on like toxic fallout areas. I think there was some real EPA damage there. And the properties, I think, dropped down temporarily to $1, but the property taxes were insanely high because the local government refused to cut them. Oh, and one more point on this short little show. So, Japanification, which is where all these major economies are heading. The US, the European Union, Japan's been doing it longer than everyone else. So, on September 30th, it was announced that Japan is raising their national sales tax despite recession worries. So, 2 percentage point hike goes into effect. The previous increases have brought on recession in Japan. So, Japan's national sales tax was raised to 10% from 8% at the end of September, amid concerns that the long-delayed move could derail the fragile growth path of the world's third largest economy. I would say, what growth? It's all total BS. Government officials say ample measures have been taken to minimize the impact of the hike, which took effect Tuesday. Previous tax increases, a 2-point increase to 5% in 1997 and another to 8% in 2014, brought on recessions. And this is because the reason they're hiking the taxes, they haven't cut government spending. They don't want to cut government spending. Because in the GDP calculations, government spending is counted as good. But in reality, to the real economy, they're crowding out the real economy. Government spending should be cut. People should get more money in their pockets, more savings. And that's what creates a real sustainable long-term economy, when people have capital, when people have savings. That's one of the main basic parts of capitalism, which we don't have because most people don't really have savings anymore. Also, bankruptcies aren't allowed too. for a lot of large companies in many industries. Why are treasuries selling like hotcakes? Raul Palace talked about this, that there's a treasury shortage. There's a dollar shortage and treasury shortage. So the U.S. government, when it needs more funding, it actually creates a shortage of dollars and treasuries for the rest of the world. Taxes in New Jersey are terrible. I've heard from people that tax accountants and tax attorneys that you should not get divorced or die in New Jersey. That's how bad things are. New Jersey has great restaurants, though. I've driven through New Jersey and the Jersey Turnpike. There's a lot of good food up there, similar in quality to a lot of places in New York. But yeah, I would never live there. Way too expensive. Oh, RR used to live in Europe. The taxes are worse. You left. Those bad taxes are coming to the U.S. soon. Especially if the Democrats gain more control of Congress. And there's a Democrat in the White House. Even if Trump wins re-election, the next president after Trump could be a Democrat if we don't already have a global financial crisis or they do some type of system reset. Who knows what they're discussing behind closed doors. There could be emergency meetings every week now, for all we know. We wouldn't know. I mean, how often does a mainstream media or mainstream financial media reporter actually do their job and do some investigative journal? Well, what's considered a good job now is not what used to be, journalism used to be, with real investigative journalism. Yeah, I just did a rant on Powell. I didn't listen to what Powell said, but I read some of it. Look, he said they're going to need to expand the balance sheet. You can live like a king if you're cheap. Not if there's a 17% VAT tax. Not if Elizabeth Warren wins the 2020 presidential election and then she copies Yang's universal basic income and puts in a 17% VAT tax on everything. And those VAT taxes, like what Japan is doing, the more they raise the VAT tax, the national sales tax or VAT tax, and if that comes to the United States, that will hurt the real economy. Consumption will drop. People will not have nearly as much discretionary income. And then that will go back to the sugar daddy index, sugar baby, sugar daddy. That will spike even more. California, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, Michigan. Pennsylvania here is pretty bad. Virginia, actually Northern Virginia, is very hardcore Democrat now, and that's starting to get really bad with taxes. Look, the politicians, I've spoken with some of these politicians over the years, Democrat ones. I've tried to have conversations with them, and they don't want to hear cuts in spending. They don't want to hear cuts in budget at all. I haven't told them like I'm a libertarian or anything like that. I've told them like, oh, I just, talk about the economy and business. And they're like, oh, the economy will be okay if I raise taxes. They actually believe that. Well, I guess the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Federal Reserve are going to have to come up with new phony economic data if they raise taxes and pretend that the economic data is going to be good. What they will probably have to do is include more and more government spending because they're refusing to cut it as positive for GDP. Carl says the red states away from the big liberal cities is the safest place. Not for much longer, Carl. Do you know why? Most of the Democrats who voted for those high tax, crazy politician, crazy rules, crazy regulation policies, they can't afford the taxes. They're hypocrites. They're leaving. Guess where they're going? They're going to Nevada. They're going to Arizona. They're going to North Carolina. They're going to South Carolina. They're going to Georgia. They're going to Florida. They're going to Texas. Okay? They're going to Colorado. They're moving down here to Virginia to escape taxes. So those normal Republican states, that's where after the Democrats have voted for those policies, a lot of older ones are moving down to the cheaper ones to retire, and they're going to vote Democrat all over again. Just give it another 10 years, maybe 20 years at most. Probably 10 years, though. Nevada used to be, I think, mostly Republican for a long time, and Nevada has turned. So Nevada and I think Colorado used to be very Republican about 15 years ago, and now Colorado's very Democrat. Nevada and Colorado have already turned. And North Carolina's it's a battleground state. The Democrats think that they can win it. And Florida is a battleground state. So just because you think that you move from one state to another, that's a permanent, quote-unquote, solution for your tax problems, it is not a permanent solution. The only, quote-unquote, solution is to figure out how to grow your income to offset, stagflate, and tax and lie. Because if you're just an employee earning a salary, and maybe you get a raise, but normally if you're an employee earning a salary to get a raise, you have to work a lot more hours, and then that means a lot more taxes. So everyone's going to have to be entrepreneurial if you want to maintain your standard of living or have an improved standard of living. So this is a new normal. It's tough. It's not fair. It's not right. But this is what happens when you have human beings who make irrational choices all the time, or short-term myopic rent-seeking choices. And then they leave the state after the consequences, after they've made a state toxic. California used to be a very good business state, and now it's not. California, on paper, should have the best, most diversified economy. They have so many advantages for so many different industries, and those advantages, for the most part, have been completely and totally ruined. Okay, California should have mining, oil and gas, agriculture, movies, technology with innovation. They should have all the manufacturing. They should have all those different ones. But they're not pro-business. Maybe they give occasional tax breaks to certain groups. The red states will stop them? No, they won't, Carl. No, they won't, because there was voter scandals in North Carolina and elsewhere. Project Veritas reported on it. The Democrats were cheating in Alabama. There was a guy on Fox News after the Roy Moore fiasco. I didn't like Roy Moore, but there was a guy, the other guy, Doug Jones. There was a guy who was bussed in from another part of the country who said on TV that he was bussed in from another state to vote and in Alabama for the senator election, and nothing happened. Some guy was like, "Oh, you don't talk about voter fraud." Yeah, almost no one goes to prison for it. It's felonies. The Democrats get away with felonies. Look at James Comey. He's even getting a television show now. The guy's like going to be hero worship. There's tons of 5-star reviews on his book. Anyone who puts a 1-star review, I think, on Amazon or Audible is risking getting their account taken down. So he's being pinned. Comey is being pinned as a hero now. Just ridiculous. Despite his track record. So I want to thank everyone for listening to this podcast. Thank you to my a little over 150 as of today Patreon account contributors, almost a dozen monthly PayPal contributors, and people who tip once in a while. Also, as an added perk, there is a article on Sandstorm Gold that I wrote. I spent over 3 hours working on, exclusive only to Patreon account contributors behind the paywall. So if you're already a Patreon account contributor, you can log in and read the article. And if you are not a Patreon account contributor and you want to read the article, now there's an incentive for you to sign up for $5 a month or so and read the article. I think it's worth it. I spent a lot of time on it. And there's a lot of good analysis and insights in there that you won't find on any of the mediocre or worse Seeking Alpha articles about Sandstorm Gold. Hey, I respect Louis Cameron. I think he's a great guy. He just sounds like he's wrong on this. He's just adamant that it's not that big a deal with the repo stuff, but the balance sheet is increasing. So whatever. Okay, well, that's good enough for now. Thank you, everyone, for your time. And I'm going to keep kicking butt and taking names with my unique content. So I haven't seen anyone else cover this story. And if you are going to work on that tax article and you do some credible research, can maybe have you on for a podcast. How do you access the are you a Patreon account contributor and can't log in, or do you want to sign up? I did not see the South Park episode about China. It doesn't matter that Bernie Sanders wasn't going to win the election anyway because Elizabeth Warren just copied his policies. It seems like Warren's being steered. Warren's copied most of Bernie's policies anyway. I think Elizabeth Warren is being chosen as the candidate. It looks to me. Whether Bernie had a heart attack or not. I mean, she's copied most of his policies anyway. Just like she plagiarizes and copies other things and then lies about being Native American to get a job and discounted student loans. Yeah, Elizabeth Warren is like a combination of Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. That's basically what she is. She doesn't have a lot of independent thoughts for her policies. No, I don't think they'll run Hillary. They won't do it. This is just Hillary. That everyone from what I've heard, and I know people in the Democrat party scene, because I am here in D.C. and I used to, before I was political many years ago, I used to hang out with some of these people for drinking and hanging out. And yeah, they don't want Hillary anymore. They're done with her. She can run all she wants. That's for her ego. But no one higher up in the Democrat Party wants her there. Bill, I disagree with that because a lot of the most radical Democrat women want Elizabeth Warren. No, I didn't say we would get 10 years. I said maybe after a reset. Look, most Americans are still asleep and will do almost anything the government says still. If Elizabeth Warren runs, I think that would be good for Trump. I didn't say Elizabeth Warren would win the election. I said she would win the nomination. If she runs, I think it would be good for Trump. If Hillary runs, that would be really good for Trump. But I really don't think she will run. Her ego is she can't stay a loser. She has to try again. But no one in the higher ups in the DNC want her to run again. They might be afraid of her. They might not be willing to say that to her face, but no one wants her to run again. Okay, guys, thank you very much for your time, and that is it for now.